Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Sean, and welcome once again to another episode of the Death Church Show. And the book that I'm going to be reading excerpts out of and go through with an exploration is going to be Jesse Lee Peterson, Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson's first book, From Rage to Responsibility, Black Conservative Jesse Lee Peterson, and America Today, by Jesse Lee Peterson with Brad Stetson, and a foreword by Dennis Prager. And what I do with the videos for the book series is that I will be reading random excerpts out of the book for about an hour for the video. That's going to be recorded on an audio device and then edited and then put onto YouTube as a video. So I will be starting with page 38 randomly, and as I always say, if you like what you hear for the entirety of reading random excerpts from the book, then please go ahead and go online or go to your local bookstore to pick up a copy for yourself. Being that I am a huge fan of the Fallen State show on YouTube, I highly suggest anything that Jesse Lee Peterson puts out. Okay, so I'm going to be starting with page 38, chapter 3, The Problem with Men and Women. You really bug me. The only differences between men and women are the differences society makes. I'm really just like you, and anybody who denies that is wrong, wrong, wrong. A white female feminist arguing with Jesse during a Q&A session following a campus debate. In few spheres of American life is there as much confusion as there is in the area of men and women and their relationships together. Psychologist John Gray has capitalized on this pathetic phenomenon, making his Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus best-selling books and seminars into a small industry. We are in nothing less than a crisis of sexual self-understanding. We wonder who we are and what we should be, even as we tell ourselves that the old morality of Judeo-Christian absolutes has no relevance today. But this crisis of personal relationships is symptomatic of our larger cultural delusion, or devolution. Today, about 44% of all first births are to unmarried women. Since 1960, the divorce rate has more than doubled. The rate of out-of-wedlock births has increased sixfold, and the rate at which young men and women take their own lives has tripled. From the highest office in the land to the dysfunctional displays of the Jerry Springer Show, the two venues are bearing an increasing likeness. People are failing to keep their commitments to one another, and sexual irresponsibility is destroying lives. In my view, we need to return to the standards of the past to solve the interpersonal problems and confusions of today. People are now seeking deep wisdom from living, and that is to be found only in the tries and traditions of yesterday, not the trends of today. I think the evident hunger for understanding each other that men and women are displaying, plus the obvious downward spiral of the social morality, proves that we need to radically rethink prevailing views of men and women. Presently, under the auspices of contemporary feminism, it is generally believed that mothers and fathers are interchangeable in their parental roles, that all men and women are basically the same, and that sex is a casual matter between consenting adults. Each of these ideas significantly contributes to the inability of men and women to understand themselves and get along with one another. Let us then look at these destructive notions in turn. First, the centrality of fatherhood. Before any social repair can begin, we have to recognize the nature of our problems. And the fact is, today, fatherlessness is our most urgent social dysfunction. From out-of-wedlock births to violence among boys, to rape and abuse of women, to drug and poor school performance, most social pathologies can be traced to today's epidemic fatherlessness. Every night, fully 40% of American children go to bed in homes in which their fathers do not live. The psychological effects on children, male and female, of this alienation from their fathers is impossible to measure, but common sense dictates that it must be profound. And yet, fatherlessness continues to proliferate because contemporary liberalism has dismissed its seriousness in an effort to sexually homogenize society. Thus, it is widely believed in our country today that mothers and fathers are duplicates of one another, that they are redundant, and that all a woman really needs from a man is his income to successfully raise her children. This is the nonsense that the triumph of feminism has given us. But to me, it is self-evident that men and women, as fathers and mothers, each have unique gifts that they can give their children. Every child has a natural right to a mother and a father, and the contributions toward his well-being that each parent can uniquely make. Where a mother is nurturing, a father is challenging. Where a mother is compassionate and emotionally indulgent, a father is fairly strict and stern. Where a mother dots, a father prods. This is more than a sort of parental good cop, bad cop routine. It is the natural order of the family, one that corresponds to the general character and dispositions of the psychologically healthy women and men. The different ways mothers and fathers tend to react to their children prove that they each have something indispensable to give them. If a young boy is trying to climb a tree and he falls, modestly injuring himself, his mother will come to him upset and say, "Oh, honey, are you all right? You're not climbing any more trees." The mother's powerful regard for her child's safety causes her to react this way. Of course, the boy will almost certainly continue to climb the trees anyway. But if after the boy falls, his father comes to him, his father will say, "Are you all right? Here, let me show you how to climb that tree." A father is able to share his masculinity with his children and to show them how to attempt to overcome barriers and failures. The father's powerful desire to see his child conquer problems and be self-sufficient causes him to react this way. This is the distinctive role of the father, which the mother, whose paramount concern is the child's physical well-being, cannot fulfill. In the same way, a father has a special role to play in the moral formation of his children. People talk a lot about unconditional love and how important it is, but I think it is a father's role not to heap unconditional love on his children and simply tell them, "Oh, I love you no matter what you do, no matter sorry, I lost my place. But I think a father's role not to heap unconditional love on his children and simply tell them, "Oh, I love you no matter what you do, no matter how you treat people, and no matter what you become." No, a mother can take that approach, but I think a father's role, indeed, his job, is to place his children under obligation. He must hold them accountable for their behavior. He is to be their primary moral guide and influence. He must let his children know with certainty that how they behave and the moral habits they thereby cultivate is an extremely important matter. The father is to be the moral guide and the ethical teacher. A mother, inclined as she is to love her children no matter what they do or what kind of character they develop, is not as able as a father to communicate to kids that there are consequences to how they behave. A father, to be an effective leader to his children, must make it clear to them that how they behave is going to affect how he feels towards them. In this way, he communicates to them the gravity of their conduct, the significance of the manner in which they treat other people. The father imperative is so strong that even mainstream culture, which has been profoundly feminized, is finally starting to recognize the centrality of fatherhood. Sociologist Barbara Whitehead has succinctly explained why. In quote, "Children in single-parent families are 6 times as likely to be poor. They are also likely to stay poor longer. They are 2 to 3 times as likely as children in 2 parents' families to have emotional and behavioral problems. They are also more likely to drop out of high school, to get pregnant as teenagers, to abuse drugs, and to be in trouble with the law. Compared with children in intact families, children from disruptive families are at a much higher risk for physical and sexual abuse. End quote. If that is not enough to convince, more recently a definitive study found what common sense has been telling people for years. Fatherless boys tend to become violent and irresponsible men. Among the study's findings were boys raised outside of marriage are more than twice as likely as other boys to end up in jail. Each year a boy spends without a dad in a home raises their odds in his future incarceration by about 5%. A boy needs to spend time with his dad. A child born to an unwed mother is roughly 2.5 times as likely to be imprisoned, while a boy whose parents split while he is a teenager is only 1.5 times as likely to be imprisoned. Among the study's other findings that explode liberal myths, a boy living with his single father as opposed to a single mother face no more higher risk of incarceration than do children from intact homes. So obviously fathers are indispensable. Child support payments from a father, that is, mere dollars without the father's presence, makes no difference in the likelihood a boy will grow up to become a criminal. And while poor kids are more likely to be incarcerated as adults, family structure with the most important aspect of their lives in determining their future. Sociologist Maggie Gallagher nicely summarized the conclusion of the study, and quote, "The attachment between father and son may be the key to responsible boys. Fathers teach their sons lessons directly and indirectly about what it means to be a man. When boys identify with fathers who are loving and available, the likelihood lessens that they will define their masculinity in terms of rebellion and antisocial aggression," quote unquote. Until we begin to emphasize the necessity of fathers, to girls as well as boys, we are not going to stop producing unhappy kids. We cannot get along with the opposite sex. The male-female relationship problems of today have their roots in the family dysfunctions and fragmentations of 10, 20, and 30 years ago. The only way to break this cycle is to assert the centrality of fatherhood to society and understand that men and women have enduring, God-ordained differences that are not merely, as the feminists say, socially conditioned. Indeed, it is far more likely that the feminists themselves have been socially conditioned to attribute all gender differences to social conditioning rather than to nature. Their movement is nothing less than a tyranny and one dead set against the traditional family. As Robert H. Bork has noted, feminism is not about giving women freedom to choose. It is about taking away choices of which feminists disapprove, and one choice they disapprove is participation in the conventional family. End quote. Yet it is the traditional family with the father as leader and head that will be the salvation of our civilization. This concept is deeply hated by liberals and misandrist feminists. It is nonetheless utterly true, and our society is finding it out the hard way. Indeed, proof of this is the national discussion now taking place of what has come to be known as the boyfriend problem. Children need their fathers living with them, not just any man, such as a single mother's boyfriend. One recent study found that live-in boyfriends are 27 times more likely to abuse a child than the child's natural father. I have for years been saying that this boyfriend problem is epidemic in the black community, and of course I get attacked when I do so. Time after time, I have counseled with young black women in their late teens or early 20s who now have deep psychological problems stemming from the sexual abuse they suffered at the hands of their mother's live-in boyfriends. One such woman I recently saw, Pat, 20 years old, was in drug rehab and trying to earn a high school diploma she never got because she had to leave school, flee her house, and stay on the streets to get away from her mother's her mother's boyfriend, who molested her and beat her mother. But finally, someone else is speaking out about this horror in black families. Anne Thompson Sketching, a black female playwright who wrote a play about this subject entitled You Shouldn't Have Told, says, for a long time, this was a taboo subject, especially in the black community. Her play has brought these issues to light, and as more and more black people speak out, even if they are called Uncle Toms or sellouts for doing so, our communities can begin to heal. Of course, this problem is culture-wide, and it is perpetuated by the intellectually lazy habit of liberalism to avoid being judgmental, quote unquote, especially of females and minorities' behavior. As David Blackenhorn notes, to bring up the boyfriend problem seems too much like you're passing judgment on the sexual behavior of single mothers, quote unquote. And under the regime of politically correct feminism that is forbidden, no matter how many children suffer. If we as a culture began to embrace the centrality of fatherhood to both the psychological and emotional well-being of children and the stability of our society, we would begin to see a massive improvements in our children and the qualities of the families they form as adults. Next part, black men, black women. The ideas of white female feminists have been especially destructive in the black community by advocating role reversal and a general female anger across America. These privileged white women have harmed black families by hindering their unity and healing. Any family, as an organic entity, has a natural healing inclination. It wants to heal itself and function well for the sake of all involved, especially the children. But the ideology of white feminists which is nothing less than rage at men and America generally, is not relevant to black women, whose major problems have always been of a more practical and less theoretical nature. The black woman wants her man to be there for her and her children, to work hard, to control himself sexually, and to provide for his family. She is not concerned about the oppressive patriarchy that privileged white women prattle on and on about. White feminists who wish to change the basic structure of American society and to have a significant extent have already succeeded at doing so, having an interest in maintaining social chaos and change. The momentum today of homosexuality, abortion on demand, silly sexual harassment suits, and so on is all to their liking because it fits their agenda of social revolution. These white women are angry at their fathers, and they are angry at men generally. So these feminists, seeking to trash the nation at which they are so angry, support hostility between black men and black women, because they are trying to enlist the black women in their cause of complete social change. The black woman is used through welfare programs, through affirmative action programs, through abortion, to promote the agenda of elite liberal white women. The black civil rights leaders are perfectly happy to let this happen because they are in league with white feminists to advance their own power. The members of the liberal coalition of race and gender grievance groups tend first to their own needs, not those of their punitive constituencies. The truth is, though, that black men and black women are perfectly capable of solving their problems on their own, without the meddling of the feminist establishment. But unfortunately, feminist seeds of discord have already been sown, mainly through their ethic of role reversal. Indeed, a primary reason black men and women don't get along today is the role reversal between them. During the last 40 years or so, the black women have largely assumed the role of the man. She has become the primary provider and authority figure for the home. This causes resentment on the part of black women. They are dissatisfied with their men for not fulfilling their rightful role of provider and caretaker for their families. Black women have then become hostile toward their men who they see as insecure and weak, as men who in short remind them of their fathers, whom often demonstrated these same qualities. When a woman has to take on both role of mother and father, as so often happens in black America, where so many men have dropped out of society, she becomes quite naturally hostile. Her daughters live with this hostility, and as adults manifest it towards men and have trouble getting along with them. This combined with frequent male irresponsibility, especially sexually, continues the cycle of anger in the black family that prevents black men and women from getting along well. Female hostility in the black family gets passed on from generation to generation, and black men don't know how to deal with this anger and are somewhat intimidated by it because it was the same anger that was in their mothers. This unsettling cycle prevents the black man from taking his role of leadership in the black family. The history of slavery and Jim Crow has something to do with this disabling of the black family, but it doesn't fully explain it, because under much of racial oppression, the black family remained very strong and largely intact. During slavery, women understood that if their husbands were taken away, it was by force. Their anger was not directed primarily at their husbands. Therefore, but today, male abandonment is really a choice, whether through liberal physical abandonment or figuratively through ineffectiveness. The man leaves his family. Either way, female anger is fomented and family recovery is made more difficult. Black women have seen white women take on the responsibilities of men even when they didn't have to, and this has only validated in the minds of black women the role of provider many of them took on out of necessity. This of course then demotivated black women from seeking to place their black men back as heads of their houses, because they now found themselves a part of a larger cultural trend. For the black man, recovering leadership in his family has been made more difficult by white feminists and their social renovations. The black man at home. Black men, abused throughout so much of history, wish to responsibly rule their families. They want to fulfill their role as men and as husbands. As with all people, they have a deep sense of what they should be doing, even if they are failing at it. In counseling, I have met many men on drugs, chasing women and drinking constantly, who are miserable living that way. They know they are failing their families and failing as men. They know they should re-embrace responsibility. I have found that men, even dysfunctional men, are motivated by the call to headship. They know that the man should be the head of the family and he should act like it. Now, let me stress that male headship doesn't mean that the man is better than the woman or that he should be served by her. Its significance lies in organization. Given the eternal constitution of men and women, the family simply works better that way. It is its organic structure. Many women today infected by feminism will say that this type of order is unfair. But in my experience, women actually prefer their man to be the head of their family. Women want a strong, reliable, good-hearted man to lead them. They want to be able to depend on their man, to trust him, and to know that he will provide for them in every way and be faithful to them. Yet, even though women really want this, few will publicly say so, because if they do, they are likely to be laughed at or criticized by other women who are envious of them and are personally unhappy in their own lives. One moment. Just turn off the notification sound. Okay. Okay, getting back to the recording. The black man, especially, having been belittled and humiliated historically, yearns to fulfill his role as the leader of his family. He desperately wants to demonstrate his competence as a man. Tragically, the confusions of our day about male and female nature and the roles of men and women do not provide a social context which makes it easy for him to accomplish that. This leads to a frustration on his part, which, coupled with the pre existent hostility of the black woman, makes many black families angry places. This is a tragedy. If black families overcame their anger, blacks in America would make more progress than 1,000 NAACP initiatives would yield. In fact, if these advocacy groups really want to help black people, they should focus on families, not politics, because that is where the most important problems facing blacks are to be found. As Dennis Prager is fond of saying, what happens in your house is more important than what happens in the White House. Next part, true masculinity. We are confused today about men and women and their proper roles and ways of relating, because, quite frankly, as a society, we have largely abandoned belief in the Judeo-Christian God. People today give lip service to religion, but they often don't really mean it. We talk the talk, but we don't walk the walk. Yet, if we returned to the simple faith of our forefathers and genuinely made pleasing God the most important quest of our lives, this country's moral decline would reverse, and the way men and women relate to one another would improve. Gender confusion is really the product of moral relativism. We don't know who we are anymore or what our respective roles are, because we have declared individual behavior a matter of taste and not objective morality. Moral relativism has led men, especially in fragmented black families, to abandon their families, to be sexually promiscuous, to avoid work, and to rely on women. And women in response often act like men, particularly in the black community. When a people abandons the practice of a common ethics rooted in a personally and socially transcendent God, they invite the twin disasters of male irresponsibility and female aggression. We find these realities commonly in black families. But when God is first in a man's life, he becomes responsible, and the shine of true manhood is upon him. Women respect men who love God and demonstrate responsibility, and they willingly submit to such men. When this takes place, order is restored in the family and intimate relationships and in people's lives as a whole. The truly masculine man is one who loves what is right. The masculine man loves truth more than anything else. He is not ego-driven. He is driven by what is right. He is not ruled by his desire for sex, but he is ruled by his desire to honor God. He looks to God to guide him into the true knowledge he has about himself. He does not rely on women for approval and satisfaction. Many men today confused about their own masculinity look to women to guide them, because they figure that way they can avoid being criticized by women, and then they feel secure as men. These men are looking to women for emotional support, but a real man never looks to women for emotional support, because as a true man, he is not driven by emotions. He is not dependent on them whatsoever. His behavior is not motivated by the need for other people's approval. He is motivated by the truth alone, and he has the strength of character to go ahead and do what is right, no matter how much he is criticized by his confused peers. The true man is self-reliant and self-confident. His family naturally looks up to him, and others find it easy to respect him. People have high regards for him because they sense he is competent, that he knows what is right and is committed to it, and is not driven by what he feels or what others expect of him. He is a man of decent character, who always treats others fairly and unfailingly looks after the interests of his family. This is authentic masculinity, and it is best found and formed in the context of traditional religious faith. The next part, the place of sex. Okay, and back to the video for this week, from rage to responsibility. And the next part is, for the second half of this video, is the place of sex on page 49. But this is certainly not the view of masculinity that prevails today. In our morally bewildered country, the lifestyle of Larry Flint or Hugh Hefner is what passes for masculinity. There tends to be a stupid equation of number of sex partners with level of masculinity. But simply having sex is not a measure of a man at all. Anyone can have an erection. That doesn't take any strength of character or self-discipline. But our sexually obsessed culture teaches men that if they are really a man, they will be sexually loose. Ironically, women's magazines are major proponents of this idea, urging women to relate to men on a sexual level first. Read the covers of Ebony, Cosmopolitan, Allure, or Marie Claire. They are all about sex and how to please a man sexually. These magazines are catering to a market in rebellion against the man-hating anger of the 1970s and the 1980s feminism. Yet these are sexually manipulative and confused women who understand neither the nature of sex nor love. They would do well to reflect on the old saying that I think is absolutely true and accurately states the different inclinations of both men and women. Women give sex to get love, men give love to get sex. The basic problem with sex and sexuality today is that it is identified as love, quote unquote, and with feelings of deep intimacy and meaning. But of course, just because two people have had sex, that doesn't mean that they're in love. Young people today confuse the two and so believe that they are fulfilling their true purpose as men and women, but simply being sexual together. But their true purpose is to form and guide a stable family together. Mistaking sex for love causes people to misunderstand the real mission as a man or a woman, and so they neglect strong character and family formation for the sake of sexual activity. This psychological mistake has hindered men and women from successfully relating to each other, and as a later consequence, it also thwarts the formation of sound families. We need to think properly about sex and recognize its limited place, valuing responsibility more than pleasure. The fact that some people think that nearly impossible is only a testament on how far we have fallen culturally. There was recently a stunning case in point in the kind of thinking that is destroying our nation today and causing people to experience so much pain in their lives because of sexual mistakes. In the classic example of the madness of today's liberalism, actress Sharon Stone assures the United Nations, in quote, "No matter how much we guard our children within our families, within our churches, within our schools, we are not stronger than the power of sexuality, particularly to a teenager." She went on, "I believe that if you truly love your children, you need to supply condoms in a place in your home. I mean, put 200 condoms in a box in some place in the house where everybody isn't all the time so that your kids can take them." End quote. This from a childless multimillionaire Hollywood elitist. I want to say this is as simply and as clearly as possible. Mrs. Stone is absolutely, without a shred of a doubt, 100% wrong. Her advice would ruin millions of families. Yet tragically, her views are largely the norm today, which is why she was asked to address the United Nations. Next part, the path to recovery. Well, what is the path to recovery? How can men and women get along better and live at peace with themselves and each other? To begin with, they need to realize that their warfare inside of themselves and with each other is spiritual first. It is nothing less than a warfare between good and evil, between order and disorder, stability and chaos. The sooner they realize that, the sooner they can start to heal. Second, people have to realize that their most important battles are within themselves, not in the external culture. Men and women should know that self-control is essential both to individual happiness and to happiness with other sex. Excuse me. No man can be happy with a woman, and no woman can be content with a man unless first each person is able to control their anger, emotions, and sex drive. To do that, people need to know where their anger comes from and how it got started so they can effectively deal with those personal issues and then move on into the future. Just as I had to forgive my parents for their failures, excuse me, lack of love for me, so people today need to search their hearts, discover the origins of their anxiety and discontent, and forgive those who have wronged them. Then they can operate in the proper state of being and function efficiently and with stability. Coming to this place of masculinity will help men and women both to stop using sex as a surrogate for real intimacy and love, to stop using sex as a kind of opiate to ease the pain of a dysfunctional personal life. Within this understanding, women will no longer employ sex as a means of manipulating men, and men will not see sex as merely recreational activity and no attendant obligations. Thus, we will stop using each other and humanize our relationships. Humanize our relationships with the opposite sex. We can then grow as people. We will love one another with truth and not with mere emotion, with a genuine depth of feeling and not the false feelings of affection that unprincipled sexual activity can give. Next part, Chapter 4. The problem with abortion. Page 52. How dare you tell women abortion is wrong? For many women, especially black women, abortion means personal freedom. A black woman who manages an inner city abortion clinic confronting Jesse during his protest of her business. It is one of the greatest ironies of our time that those who pass for black leaders are so vocal about every perceived racial slight, and yet are not only silent, but even supportive of the most overt and destructive attack on black Americans: abortion on demand. Abortion is unique among political issues. While debates about affirmative action, gerrymandering, and tax policy are important, they are not life and death issues. Abortion is. It is an undeniable fact that every abortion kills every human being. And it is an undeniable fact that the practice of abortion in this country is immensely harmful. First, to the preborn human being it kills, but then also in less obvious ways to the woman who aborts, to the man who participates in abortion, and to the larger culture. Since abortion, even though it is a primarily skirmish of the contemporary culture war, is still a topic shrouded in mystery and misinformation. I will first bring before us the true nature and meaning of abortion, then focus on its significance for Black America, a subject profoundly underdiscussed. I will conclude this chapter by examining what abortion practice does to human relationships, including how it affects the most important purpose in a man's life, fatherhood. Next part, page 53, abortion, the ultimate betrayal. Choice is the word of the day. Everything from watches to cars to insurance is sold by our appeal to your right to choose. This is how profoundly deep our culture absorption of the rhetoric of abortion rights has been. It's choice. Choice is a clever word for the abortion establishment to fly as its banner, since it reminds us of freedom and liberty. It has positive emotional connotations, but when we look carefully at the use of the word choice in the context of abortion, we can see how utterly meaningless it really is. Choice itself is bankrupt as an ethical concept. Many people today believe that merely because they have made a behavioral choice or selected a position on a given topic or issue, their decision is therefore morally right and immune from critical evaluation. But the act of making a choice does not by itself make the choice right or good. Choice is not itself a moral value. It is only a faculty of the will. It is neither good or bad in itself. Choice, the act of making a decision alone without any social context, is just a mechanical mental operation like adding 2 and 2. But does the mere fact that a decision has been made automatically render that decision morally right? Well, of course not. The worth of our decisions and expressions of freedom depends on the courses decided or the ends chosen. The moral equality or the moral quality of our choices is wholly determined by what it is we have chosen to do and why we have chosen it. The the absolution, I can't pronounce this word, of freedom in contemporary American life and the automatic rightness accorded actions done by individual choice obscures this and protects the work of choice and self-expression from moral criticism of even the simplest form, or simplest sort, I'm sorry. The truth is in other areas of life, free from the confusing fog of political correctness and shrouding consideration of prenatal human life and abortion. We routinely, as individuals and as a public, approve or disapprove of individual and social choices based on the context of these choices. We need to evaluate morally the substance of our choices. Right and wrong are independent of our emotions. They are not decided by them. The abortion ethic denies this common sense idea. The consequence of this country's basic declaration that we can't make a moral judgment about abortion are horrific. Foremost among them is the near complete dehumanization of the fetus. No longer deemed part of the human community, prenatal human beings are commonly disparaged and victimized. Consider this gruesome resume of inhumanity. George Tiller, a Wichita, Kansas abortionist who specializes in late-term abortions, has said, "The woman is the patient and the fetus is the problem. This is as big as a cancer, as big as a malignancy." End quote. In Dr. Tiller's place of business, it is routine for him to commit 10 to 20 late second and third trimester abortions each week, in which several women at the time lie on cots in a room in a clinic basement, laboring to deliver their nearly full-term but dead babies. Tiller advertises widely, including on the internet, and charges from $1,850 to $3,000, cash only, for each abortion, incinerating the aborted babies in his own basement crematorium on the premises. Oh my God. Next part said the father of Melissa Drexter, when asked if he could forgive his daughter, the high school senior who gave birth in the bathroom during her prom, then killed her baby and left him in the bathroom trash can before returning to the dance floor. There's nothing to forgive. Okay, next part. Brian Peterson and Amy Grossberg, the wealthy New Jersey teens who gave birth to their baby in a Delaware motel room, then promptly threw the child into the dumpster where he died, were sentenced to 24 and 30 months in jail respectively, and ordered to perform community service as well, which perversely the wise judge in their case said should include counseling teenagers on parenthood. Meanwhile, a Wisconsin man is given 12 years in prison for killing several cats. Okay. Next part, a woman in Wisconsin was charged with attempted homicide for purposely trying to drink her nearly full-term baby to death. The woman's defense attorney argued that the woman had not committed a crime by law because her alcoholic assault on her preborn child could take place before the baby had been born. Assuredly, the attorney asserted the alleged victim was not a human being. Oh my God. Oh, this is pretty dark. The baby named Megan had been born after the woman's drinking binge with facial abnormalities, including a compressed nose and wide-set eyes. Her future mental abilities are not known. The baby was placed in foster care where her progress has been reported as slow. Okay, next part. Recently, a woman who shot herself in the stomach in order to kill the 20-week fetus inside of her. The baby survived the attack, was born alive, but later died after efforts to save him. The woman, 19 years of age, was charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter. Of course, she had aborted in an abortion clinic, killing the child at the same age of development and even later would have been perfectly legal. In 1993, a 24-week-old fetus received life-saving surgery while still in utero, but had the mother wished to have his fetus killed through abortion, in every state of the nation it would have been legal for her to do so. In a similar case, Noah Kipfmiller, born in the early 1998, received life-saving surgery while he was still in the womb. He was suffering with spina bifida, a serious congenital defect which often results in the mother having an abortion. But this miraculous surgery performed on Noah when his mother was 23 weeks pregnant with him saved his life. His mother could have walked into any abortion clinic in the country and paid a doctor to kill Noah at the same age he had life-saving surgery. A man in Texas was convicted of manslaughter while driving drunk. Okay, and now starting the last part, where I'm going to continue reading the problem with abortion for the end of this video. Okay, continuing, while driving drunk, he hit a car in which a 7.5-month pregnant woman was riding. The baby girl was born shortly after the accident, and within 2 days died from injuries she suffered as a result of the accident. In language that was Orwellian and yet chillingly honest, the last sentence of the article about this tragedy reads, "Abortion rights supporters warn that the conviction of the drunk driver could lead to a new determination of when life begins and eventually the outlawing of abortion." Sorry. Next part. In California, the state Supreme Court had held that someone who causes the death of a fetus as early as 7 weeks can be charged with fetal murder. This does not apply to doctors who, with the mother's consent, cause the death of fetuses, sometimes much later in pregnancy. Next part. The ACLU argued that the 1970 California law against fetal murder could not be used against a pregnant woman who caused the stillbirth of her full-term baby by going on a 2-day drug spree just before the child's birth, because the law violated the woman's right to privacy by intruding on her freedom to make decisions about childbearing and health care. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, in California, such as prenatal abuses of the fetus are usually not prosecuted in deference to strongly influential feminist lobbies and the powerful abortion establishment. Indeed, our culture's dehumanization of the preborn is so complete, and our elitist commitment to abortion is so empathetic that tortured readings of law are given in order to protect the status quo of abortion practice. Thus, a California appeals court ruled that a law punishing one parent for beating another doesn't apply to pregnant women. The court argued pregnant women aren't really mothers, since the word mother is defined in the law in a way that makes the birth of the child an essential prerequisite. So all you pregnant ladies, that morning sickness you're having, that kicking you feel in your stomach, and those ultrasound pictures you have on your refrigerator, you're just hallucinating. You're not really a mother. Yeah, that's pretty twisted. There was no question that every abortion kills a human being before its birth. Deep down, everyone really knows this. The unborn human being has a unique and permanent genetic identity since conception, a beating heart since 3.5 weeks, detectable brain activity since 6 weeks, fully formed fingers, toes, and an internal organ since 8 weeks. By 3 months, this human being is forming fists, bending arms, curling toes, and rapidly growing. This is not a potential life, it is an actual life with potential. This reality is so compelling that even leading pro-choice feminists like Naomi Wolf has acknowledged it and called for their comrades to frankly admit that every abortion kills a human life. Nevertheless, professional advocates of legal abortion persist in feign wonderment at whether or not the fetus is a living human being. Excuse me. The logic against them could not be more elementary. First, the unborn entity is an actual being. It is alive. If this were not so, there would be no need for an abortion. The very purpose of the abortion is to kill that which is alive. Second, this being is human. What else could it be? Feline, canine, bovine? As Congressman Henry Hyde once equipped, no woman has ever given birth to a golden retriever. Human beings give birth to human beings. It is disingenuous to claim that the fetus is not definite living human being. Those who had seen ultrasound images of preborn babies have eyewitness empirical evidence of the unborn's living humanity. In an insightful yet simple attempt to make plain the logically and biologically necessary conclusion that every human life begins at conception, psychologist Sidney Callahan writes, in quote, If we took a movie of everyone alive and ran it backward, we would see that we are continuous with our embryonic beginnings. We can rationally infer that the child and the infant, and before that, the fetus and the embryo, are continuously us. End quote. This truth was telling borne out by the experience of the Los Angeles obstetrician who wrote of why he no longer does abortions. After the onset of depression and self-hate following years of abortion practice, Dr. George Flesch explained how his change of heart came about. Early in my practice, he said, a married couple came to me and requested an abortion. Because of the patient's cervix was rigid, I was unable to dilate it to perform the procedure. I asked her to return in a week when the cervix would be softer. The couple returned and told me that they had changed their minds and wanted to keep the baby. I delivered the baby 7 months later. Years later, I played with little Jeffrey in the pool at the tennis club where his parents and I were members. He was happy and beautiful. I was horrified to think that only a technical obstacle had prevented me from terminating Jeffrey's potential life. 58. So Jeffrey's is one life spared from the grisly altar of choice. He is one of the lucky ones. Why then the slaughter of the innocents? The basic answer is simple: pure selfishness. We are a selfish people. We want to do what we want, no matter what, and so we allow this more selfish and unnatural act. Of course, opportunistic politicians are only too eager to cater to this irresponsible and unreflective self-centeredness. They find it easier to say to people seeking abortion, go ahead, do whatever you choose, rather than to remind people of their moral duty to not harm the innocent. Consider these 5 famous politicians who used to be pro-life, but now, because it is convenient to them, spout a slogan of choice. Bill Clinton once wrote in a letter, I am opposed to abortion and to the government funding of abortions. We should not spend state funds on abortion because so many people believe abortion is wrong. Richard Keptart, minority leader of the House of Representatives, wrote in 1977, life begins at conception. The Supreme Court's abortion ruling was unjust, and it is incumbent on the Congress to correct the injustice. Later in 1984, he wrote, I believe that the life of the unborn should be protected at all costs. In 1984, Al Gore stated in a letter to a constituent his deep personal conviction that abortion is wrong, and he voted to change the Civil Rights Act so that it would define the term person to include unborn children from the moment of conception. Mr. Gore no longer believes prenatal children deserve protection. Senator Edward Kennedy wrote that in 1971 that human life, even at its earliest stages, had a certain right which must be reorganized: the right to be born, the right to love, the right to grow old. Jesse Jackson used to speak out against the abortion culture and on behalf of the unborn. He once asked what happens to the mind of a person and the moral fabric of a nation that accepts the abortion of a life of a baby without a pang of conscience. What kind of a person, what kind of a society will we have 20 years hence if life can't be taken so casually? The answer, of course, is a very selfish and brutal one. Accompanying the encoding of abortion, selfishness in the law and protecting it, is an elaborate language of dehumanization and denial. Phrases like right to choose, ending a pregnancy, and reproductive freedom have hypnotized our nation and dulled our conscience. As Michael Bauman of Hillsdale College frankly comments, we hide the fetal holocaust that surrounds us every day just as effectively as the Nazis hid their experimentation of the Jews. And we do it the same way. We cannot bring ourselves to utter M word, though we commit the M act. That is, we do not murder unborn children. We abort fetuses. Some of the more squeamish among us are unable to even say the A word. Though by aborting fetuses rather than murdering babies, our linguistic sleight of hand had hidden the real nature of our action, murder, and the real identity of our victim, baby. Some people require a still heavier dose of verbal opium. We must tell them that they are merely terminating a pregnancy, which eliminates overt reference to any living thing. If terminating pregnancies is still too overt a verbal description, because the word pregnant tends to evoke an unfortunate image of happy women large with child, we can hide the crime behind an even more impersonal wall of words. We can say that the murdering of unborn children is nothing more than involuntary extraction of the product of conception. Or, as nearly all abortion clinics have it, removing the POC, what could be more innocent? End quote. An important effect of the sanitized language is that it lends to our remarks about the abortion of the unborn the appearance of reasonableness. It allows us to believe that we have seriously and forthrightly engaged the full moral meaning of abortion, that we have acted as responsible and mature moral agents. But in fact, all we have done is deceive ourselves. We have taken our place in a long procession of people who have participated in a rhetorical dance of obfuscation and self-justification regarding the human target destroyed by the violence of every abortion committed. This participation only works to strengthen the intellectual atmosphere which shapes the culture of choice in our talk of abortion. As a culture, we conspicuously avoid really talking frankly about abortion. As one sociologist put it, there had been virtually no reporting at all on the debate over the moral status of the fetus. What is being aborted after all? In abortion and public policy discussions to raise the topic of beauty and awesome nature of nascent human life, details of fetal development or personal obligations implicated by the value of the unborn is to be mocked as carrying on the love affair with a fetus. As former Surgeon General Jocelyn Elders once said, abortion opponents did, to their great shame in his eyes, for Dr. Elders and those of her ilk, as her remarks imply, the human fetus is not a legitimate object of love. Deep concern for it is a mistake, and fetal life is not worthy of a sort of close attention and reflection one associates with the affection as intense as love, quote unquote. This is an extremely significant understanding rooted in much of American culture. Of course, the irony of Dr. Elders, formerly the leading national health officer and a pediatrician, holding such a view is great. It is a testimony to the depths which unborn human life has been denigrated and dehumanized. 30 years after the advent of institutionalized abortion practice, the human fetus is not to be regarded as an appropriate object of love. This disturbing reality is only underlined by the fact that the perspective Dr. Elders' remarks reflects is one that dominates among bureaucratic, political, and media elites, all of which help incline the body politic to the friction that compassion requires as a nation to embrace liberal abortion laws. This is an extremely powerful moral judgment in American life. It has ascended to the level of public truth that is a generally accepted, unquestioned feature of the social and cultural landscape. There was no such thing as being compassionate to the unborn. Not only are they not accorded the legal status of persons, but they are not even allowed in public discussion as legitimate objects of concern. Thus, the devaluation of their lives is not just a legal and moral reality. It is largely a pattern response of the public consciousness itself. To realize the power of this settledness, we only need note that opinion polls consistently show that Americans oppose the morality and legality of most abortions performed, and that most Americans are stunningly ignorant of current abortion law. The result, abortions throughout the 3 trimesters of pregnancy continued at the rate of about 1.4 million annually. But even though the contemporary flavor of American culture and society devalues pre-born human life and inhibits open, comprehensive public reflections on it, there was no question that the Americans are becoming less comfortable with the regime of abortion on demand. People are growing more aware of this use of abortion as after-the-fact contraception and of the rhetoric of choice as an asylum for personal moral responsibility for both women and men. In fact, most people who say that they are pro-choice actually tend to disapprove of the legality and morality of many abortions, when particularly circumstances are identified. Significantly, the number of people who say that they support legal abortion under any circumstance has dropped 8% points since 1994. So thank you for tuning in for this episode. Once again, if you'd like to pick up the book, and I strongly recommend it, it's kind of a hard read here, being it's emotionally tugs at you, but that's something that you and I definitely need. From Rage to Responsibility by Jesse Lee Peterson, the Black Conservative in America Today, forward by Dennis Prager. Thank you and God bless.